Bueno, creo que podemos arrancar, son y 5, ¿de acuerdo? Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Un par de frases en español para daros las buenas tardes y la bienvenida a este webinar. Como anunciamos, el seminario va a ser en inglés, entonces si me permitís voy a pasar ya directamente al inglés para presentar a nuestro ponente hoy. Good afternoon, everybody. Great to see you here. This is our third webinar. And it's been pretty successful as following the number of attendants to this session. It's my great pleasure to present our guest speaker this afternoon here. It's Dr. André Carrascal Incera. André is affiliated to the City-REDI Research Institute at the University of Birmingham. He has been there for more than 2 years, if I remember correctly. He's an expert in multi-sectoral model in general, input-output in particular, and he has been contributing to the literature, but not only to the literature, but also to the input-output community at the Spanish level, at the international level as well. He's, for example, now the editor of the newsletter of the input-output International Input-Output Association, so probably you already know his name. He has been very interesting stuff about the impact of this coronavirus in the regional economies, in particular in the UK. And actually, this is the title of his presentation today. This is like Once Upon a Time in a Pandemic, Economic Exposure of the UK Regions to COVID-19. André will present his research in, let's say, something like 40 minutes, more or less. And we will take the questions at the very end of the webinar. For the questions, if you are, let's say, more comfortable making your question in Spanish, of course you can do it. And you can just raise your virtual hand in Teams in order to indicate that you are interested in making a question, or you can type it in the chat, okay? But this will be after André's presentation. Again, thanks so much, André, for being here today. It's our pleasure to have you here, and the room is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Esteban.
Sorry,
Yes.
Something that I forgot to mention. So please mute your microphones. I think all of you are already muted, excepting Andrea and myself, most probably. And if you want to switch off your camera, I think it's okay as well. Sorry to interrupt.
Sorry, but I have to add a technical issue, is that the session is being recorded, so if you participate, you are granting permission to do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Antonio.
Okay, let me go to share my screen now. Yeah, I think you can already see it, right?
We are seeing it, Andrea. I think
okay, great, because I cannot see any of you, so it's good to know. Let me start by thanking all the SHAIO Council that you are all seeing there in this webinar as participants, especially Esteban, Jorge, and Antonio for thinking about me for this presentation, and then for inviting me to do this talk. As Esteban was saying, well, it would be my pleasure, not your pleasure. I'm sure about it. As Esteban was saying, the title of this presentation is Once Upon a Time in a Pandemic, Economic Exposure of the UK Regions to COVID-19, and it's basically an extension of some blogs that I did in March, when the crisis was reaching the very beginning, the UK, for the City-REDI blog series. At that time, I did it for the West Midlands. By now, what I'm going to do is to do it for the whole UK regions and compare them. So the overview of the presentation, basically at the beginning, I'm going to introduce the main characters of this story that I'm going to tell you. And this story is going to be divided into 3 chapters, as it was like any other novel. So the first chapter is going to be what was happening at the beginning of 2020, the first 2 months, January and February. What we were seeing in the UK regions was basically some disruptions in global value chains that coming from Asian countries. In the second chapter, I'm going to talk what was happening and what were the debate in March 2020. Issues related with what is essential production and what is not. We are going to introduce, for some of you, probably most of you already know what is the foundational economy, and then also I will talk a little bit about the invisible workers. In the third chapter, I want to go through the third to these 3 months, April, May, and June, which were basically the months, the 3 months where we were under lockdown at the very beginning of the crisis in the first 6 months. Then after that, in some countries, they release a little bit the pressure that we was having these lockdowns. Basically, at the very end, I'm going to draw some conclusions from these 3 chapters, and then, of course, some things to discuss among everyone that is attending. So let me start by introducing the main characters of this story. Of course, the main character here is the UK economy, and as any other economy is made by regions, but it's also made by sectors, and most importantly, is made by people, which is the center of any economy. And we should not forget that one economy without people is no economy. So let's stress that as much as we can always. Let me introduce you already the bad guy of this story. Of course, is the coronavirus and the COVID-19. You already know it, unless you were living in a different planet for the last year. For sure, you know why it's called coronavirus, what is their main characteristics and the main consequences of getting it and everything. So I'm not going to stop there for longer. The interesting thing and why the UK is a nice case to study is that, so let me go a little bit more through the main character here, is that as in any other country, regions in the UK are quite diverse, both in population density and in income level, but also in their structure of the production and their trade dependency from other regions. It could be from other regions in the UK or foreign. But also these different characteristics that region has basically creates the diverse resilience performances of all of them. And it creates this map that I'm showing you there in the right. Basically, we can classify the UK regions in different groups, in different clusters. With basically what you can get from this map is that we have poorer regions, low-income regions that were more specialized in manufacturing, and they are not quite dense. But the specific part of this, the specific thing of these regions is that they have a second-tier city in it. So, for example, you can see here, West Midlands, Birmingham is inside it. You have Manchester and Liverpool here, Leeds, and also other second-tier cities. Those are low-income regions in the UK. And then you have other rural, which are the green and the blue regions. And the basically the richer part of the UK is here close to London and the southeast. Basically, you have different kinds of regions inside London, but the most interesting thing that you have to know that is that there is a big divide between the southern part of the UK and the north part of the UK, as you can see also in this map. So related to that is that the UK today is one of the most geographically unbalanced countries in the OECD. And that's because of agglomeration effects and modern production processes, as was shown by McCann in the 2016, and also a recent paper that we did, that we show the historical trends in interregional inequality, and the trend that the UK is having now is going up in contrast with the rest of the countries. But also it's an interesting case because Brexit it's also going to happen next year, and it's from other literature that we have been seeing these years, we can say that is going to affect more those regions that voted in favor of leaving, ironically, and then it also threatens to widen the gap between regions even more. So this interregional inequality that we are seeing here, it can increase because of Brexit. The main question that we should ask us at this moment is why we should expect to find spatial differences in the economic impact of coronavirus. And basically, for those of you that are not that familiar with regional economics or this kind of literature, we normally say, and is accepted, that regions are more specialized and open than countries. Then they are normally the employment vulnerability, specialization, and transmission of shocks are different for different regions. So it means that they are more specialized than countries, but they are specialized in different things normally. And then also globalization and spatial fragmentation and modern supply chains are playing a role here. It means that if a region is more connected to another region that is suffering a downturn, then this region is going to be more affected than other regions that are not connected to the prior region. Basically, what we are saying here, and what a good friend of mine would say, geography matters. And what we can add to that is that industrial complexity and interdependencies also matter too here. The objective of this presentation is going to be to identify the most exposed regions, sectors, and workers during the first months of the coronavirus crisis in the UK. And just to give you a first hint of what we are going to find, I'm showing you here what the European Barometer of Regions and Cities that was published on the 2nd of October was saying. This map that is on your right is done by the Joint Research Center, so I guess some of you are already quite familiar with this map and probably with the results too. But basically what this European Barometer was saying is that the regional sensitivity to coronavirus impacts is determined by the structure of the economy of each region. So it means that if you are specialized in a high-risk sector, you are going to be more affected by lockdown or other measures that they are taking. It will be basically related to dependency on tourism, which is one of the sectors or main activities that suffer most from lockdowns. But also we have arts and entertainment sector that was completely shut down in many regions, manufacturing that was affected by value chain disruptions. And then you have another kind of sectors like agriculture, energy, and public administration that are much less sensitive to these measures, to these lockdowns. So basically, this is kind of a hint of the results we are going to get at the end. And let me start from the first chapter. This is what was happening in the first 2 months of 2020, January and February. From a UK point of view, what we were seeing is that at that time, the crisis, the coronavirus was, we saw an outbreak in China, and it was mainly affecting Asian countries. And at that time, we were thinking that we would not be affected by that. We were seeing some consequences of this outbreak that was basically disruption in the supply chains. During these months, we also saw that some of the measures that were taken by countries were the closure of borders. And then this came in, let's say, a bad moment, let's say, in a time series scale, because regions and the production processes were more fragmented than in the past. The geographical sources of supplies and destinations for markets are constantly changing, and that makes regions more vulnerable to particular supply disruptions, as in this case. The kind of exercise I'm going to do here, I'm going to do it with the EU region model that I'm sure you are already familiar with it. I'm taking the last year that I have available, that is 2010. Then I basically rearrange a little bit the input-output table, creating or leaving the UK NUTS 2 regions that are 37. I'm leaving also China, and then I aggregate the rest of the world all together. The industry level is 14 industries. And then what I'm going to do here is basically use the hypothetical extraction method that you already know and you are for sure familiar with it, which basically means that we are going to remove part of the system and see the effects on the UK regions. What I'm going to remove in this case, and I'm putting here different ways to measure exposure to trade, is, for example, in the first case, we can remove China, absolutely everything. So China from the intermediate input-output table, and then also from the final demand. But we could also check the exposure to China, seeing or putting as zeros just the part of China buying UK final demand products as final demand, let's say, and then China not buying also UK products as intermediate products. That's, for example, this is the kind of approach that Barlos and others and Chen et al. Did in the Brexit paper, in Papers in Regional Science. Another way to measure exposure to trade is, in this case, this one would be the exposure to exports of the UK regions, where we are making zeros the buys that China and the rest of the world are doing from UK products in the final demand. So basically, the first one and the third one are the ones that we are going to apply in here, and we are going to see how exposed they are, the UK regions are to China, basically. And we can see here already the relative exposure to exports and Chinese disruptions of all the regions in the UK, and you can see that the regions are affected differently. We have regions here that are more affected relatively to all exports, to disruptions in all the exports, and you have here regions that are more affected to extracting China instead of all the other exports, so they are more intensive in Chinese products. In general, we have regions that are basically more than 0.8% of the GVA depend on the Chinese production, buying and selling to China, basically. Those are basically regions that are specialized in manufacturing sectors. Then you have others that are less exposed to China, so it means that extracting China from the UK from the input-output table means less than 0.5% of the GVA for Eastern Scotland, Outer London, and Northeastern Scotland. Same thing, we can basically extract all the exports that the UK regions are doing to the rest of the world and to China, and we see that for some of the regions it means more than 9% of the total GVA. Those regions are again the manufacturing regions, and the ones that are less exposed to exports, they see an effect of less than 6% of their GVA, are Inner London, Outer London, and Northeastern Scotland. We can draw some conclusions if we compare the total domestic value added exposure with the gross disposable income per household of extracting China, extracting just the electrical and optical equipment and transport equipment of China, which means almost 20% of Chinese production, and then the same thing comparing this total exposure with the gross disposable income when we extract all exports of the UK regions. So what we can see here is that, while China, when we extract China from the table, it will not increase the UK interregional inequality. A little bit more, we can see a little bit more that when we extract transport equipment and optical equipment. But what we can see for sure is that poorer regions depend more from selling their products outside than richer regions. So we can see here that richer regions, they depend a little bit less from exports than what poorer regions depend. Those poorer regions are the ones that I was telling you at the very beginning in the first map that are manufacturing regions. Another conclusion that we can get from here, basically from extracting all the exports, is that London, which is basically this point in here, the richer one, is not connected, let's say, not as much as the rest of the region with the rest of the world and China, but with the rest of the country, which is the one minus the exports, let's say. So it's basically selling most of their products to the rest of the UK. But as in McCann in 2016 and other works that we have been doing, is just partially connected, selling them their products, but not buying much from the other regions. That's why the other regions are also selling more outside. This is one of the results we are getting here from the first chapter. Then in the second chapter, we are going to try to see what was the main debate that was around in March 2020. And the discussion was around what is essential production and what is a key worker. Basically, something that we know that is for sure a key work in a health crisis is health services and people that is working in health services. And that was for sure the most important economic impact, or the most important impact that coronavirus would have in the UK regions and the rest of the world for sure. But yes, health workers are on the front line of this crisis, and we all know about it. But in order to satisfy health services demand, they need more than just direct workers working in health workers. They also need additional indirect workers that support them and that work in other sectors. And this is what Lopez and Zafrilla, they call invisible workers in this article they wrote for The Conversation, also around the same time, around March. I recommend you to read it because it's a very nice article, this one. They call these additional indirect workers that are related to health workers invisible workers. And they are invisible because normally we take it for granted. So, and this is quite important. It is important to understand the role of the sectors that are affected indirectly when governments all over the world were thinking on shutting down all non-essential production, because some of those non-essential production could be related indirectly to some essential production. So the economy works as an interconnected system, and I don't need to explain much of this here in an input-output forum, but you know that if you disrupt some of these sectors that are affected indirectly, or some of these sectors that are supplying essential production, some of this essential production will not be able to be produced. Let's see which are the main suppliers of human health services. Human health services is mainly connected to sectors like basic pharmaceutical products. You can see the graph, the figure here on the right. Computer, electronic and optical products, scientific research and development services, then architectural and engineering services, but because they are together with technical testing and analysis services, those are mainly the main ones, and then residential care and social work activities that in some tables they even appear together with human health activities. But as you can see in the figure in the right, there are many other services, many other sectors, many other products that are supplying that are part of this supply chain of the human health services. So it's not easy to pick the core ones. And then, so we know that health services are an essential production and they cannot be closed, but what about the rest of the sectors that we have in an economy? So here is where the foundational economy concept came quite handy. And let me introduce you this for those of you that don't know what I am talking about here. What Bentham et al. In 2013 in this manifesto for the foundational economy said about it, or they defined foundational economy as this production that is normally taken for granted, so it's mundane, that covers all everyday necessities, basically. So in other words, it's that part of the economy that is creating and distributing goods and services consumed by all, regardless of income or status, because they support everyday life. And what they were claiming at that time is that it was not included in any kind of industrial strategy here in the UK. They are normally sectors that are forgotten. So what is included in this foundational economy that is related with this essential production? Well, what they defined there, the sectors that they included were basically related to utilities, so energy, water, and sewerage. Also, as we are a society that make our mainly payments through transfer and card payments, retail banking was kind of another utility, other retailing through supermarkets, and also food processes to guarantee some food survival, let's say. Then transport and distribution of people and goods is also a necessity, and then telecommunication networks, and finally, of course, the ones we were talking before, health, education, and welfare and social care. So these are the ones that they define as the core part of the economy, this foundational economy. What we are going to do in this second chapter is to calculate the employment footprint of both human health and social work activities, and then also the foundational economy for the UK regions, and see the results we can get from there. You can see the table there with the sectors that are included. The database that I'm going to use for this is the same UK socioeconomic impact model of the UK developed at City-REDI. We developed it there in the Institute. The base year is 2016 because it was the last ONS table that was available for the UK. It is, again, a multi-regional input-output framework, 41 regions. The industry level is a little bit bigger or larger than the EU region. We have 30 industries that come from the UK national accounts, those ones that I was showing you before. And then we have a labor demand with 25 occupations that can be aggregated into 3 skill levels by industry and region. The way to construct this, well, I'm not going to spend much time on this, but basically we get most of the margins of the table from the ONS, from the National Statistics Office, and NATS 2 level and NATS 1 level when that was not possible. And then for basically for estimating the interregional intermediate matrix, we use the charm method. What is more interested about it is that this multi-regional framework let us also compare different regions in the UK. For example, I'm comparing here Cumbria and West Midlands, and you can check from here, these are flows, that Cumbria is more specialized in these first sectors that are agricultural products, and then some other manufacturing around here, and then West Midlands is way more specialized in services as products. So we go to the results of this chapter 2. We can see that the contribution of health services goes from 23% more or less of West Central Scotland until close to 10%, a little bit more than 10% from Inner London West. So there are quite a big range of results in here. How you can read this, the way of reading this graph, this figure, is that you have here the first bar in blue, which is direct employment, and then you have in orange the invisible workers that are supplying, basically are supplying their work or are producing for this direct employment on health services. And these invisible workers are bigger. If you take a look of the orange bar, are bigger for Inner London West, Inner London East, Outer London, Greater Manchester, also West Midlands, which means basically in West Central Scotland, which are basically the most dense regions, the regions that have a big city on it. If we compare it again with the gross disposable income, we can see that the total contribution of health services is higher for those regions that are a little bit poorer, which means that the richer regions are more diverse and they depend less on health services. Then again, the ratio of indirect workers times direct workers is higher for those that are richer regions, which means that per each direct worker, they need more indirect workers contributing to them. If we compare it, so most of the regions are here a little bit below 0.2, and some of them, the rest of them are between 0.2 and 0.4, and this is Inner London West, which is the richest region in the UK. Comparing it with the results that Lopez and Zafrilla show in that article that I was telling you before, they give a result for Spain that is close to 0.25, that would be around here. 0.25 for the average of the whole Spain. So that would be more or less something around here. We can do the same kind of analysis for the foundational economy, and this is the economic contribution of the foundational economy. As you can see, those 9 sectors that we were selecting before, they generate for some of the regions more than 50%, or they mean more than 50% of the total employment in the regions, both directly plus the invisible workers, the indirect workers. So this is the total contribution to the total employment, basically. And it goes again from more than 50% to a little bit more than 35% here, 30-something percent, 34% more or less that Cumbria has. Again, way important are the differences in the invisible workers that are supplying their work, that are supplying products to the direct employment of the foundational economy. We can do again the comparison between gross disposable income and total contribution on the foundational economy and the ratio between indirect workers and direct workers. And again, we see the same picture here. Poor regions that are more depending on, that are more specialized in this foundational economy, and then richer regions that are less specialized in the foundational economy, which means that they are more diverse or more diversified than that. That is also related on why they have more indirect workers supplying their work to the direct workers, basically through the supply chains. Another interesting result that we have here is that Inner London West is in this part here down, also Inner London East, but we have all Outer London South and Outer London East and Northeast in the upper part of this figure, which means that probably, and it's true, they are part of the same local labor market, and probably some of the parts of London are supplying these type of services to the other part of London. In any case, what we can see also here is the contribution of health services and the foundational economy to the different occupations, or how much it means for all these 25 occupations that we were talking before. We can divide these 25 types of occupations in skill level, high skill, medium skill, and low skill. And of course, directly for health services, the most affected ones are health professionals, health and social care, and then caring personnel. But you can see that the other occupations are also affected indirectly. In the case of the foundational economy, it also includes the ones for health, also the educational ones, and then also sales occupations and transport and drivers and operatives. But in this case, it is the direct and indirect is a little bit more diverse, let's say. It's not as concentrated as in this one. We can check the skill levels, as I was saying before, aggregating them, and we can see that the total contribution of health services is higher. So health services basically are composed more of high skilled people and medium skilled people, less of low skill. But the interesting part of this is that this direct contribution is more on high skill and medium skill, and the contribution that it has, that health services has on low skill is due to these indirect and these invisible workers, or these indirect workers that supply them. In the case of the foundational economy, it is not exactly like that. Directly, it affects the three of them, but mostly low skilled. Take into account also that is including health services. So if probably we exclude health and education, most of the other sectors are going to be employing low skill occupations. And then indirectly, it is affecting relatively more to high skills and medium skills. But basically, the contribution to all the different skill levels is more or less the same. This was basically what I did for the chapter 2, and now we are going to see what we can say about chapter 3, what was happening in the last 3 months, April, May, and June, the last 3 months of the first 6 months of 2020. And this is what you probably have seen already for many other countries or many other regions around the world. This is the impact of locking down people and shutting down some sectors. Basically, on the 24th of March, which was a little bit later than countries like Spain or Italy, for example, the UK entered officially into lockdown, and we started seeing these pictures that you are seeing there in your right. So basically, places like London and, well, the Big Ben is being remodeled or whatever, they're being cleaned in that picture. But basically, you can see that a place that is full of people normally is completely empty. Same thing for Bristol, Liverpool, and Birmingham there. Basically, these measures, this lockdown, they were done for avoid gatherings and social interaction. At the same time, they shut down some sectors for the same reason, like accommodation and food services activities, restaurants, bars, hotels, etc. And also basically arts, entertainment, recreational activities like museums, sporting events, etc. Some other sectors are going to see their demand reduced due to the number of people that is going to work from home. These locking down people, not everyone get redundant. Some of the people continue working from home, and that means that, for example, the demand for rail transport and transport services is going to go down. Personal services and business activities too. That would be in general. These scenarios that we are going to apply here in this third chapter are basically the OECD scenario that they did in the 26th of March in this report evaluating the initial impact of COVID-19 containing measures on economic activity. And in this report, the scenario that they built, remember that at that time nobody knows what the agents were doing and how the demand will want to be behaving. So the assumption they did and the scenario they did is basically full shutdowns for transport, manufacturing, and other personal services, which means 100% decline for 3 months. Declines of 1/2 for construction and professional services activities, and declines of 3/4 for all other sectors directly affected by shutdowns, which are mainly hospitality, so accommodation and food services, and recreational activities. So these calculations, they were making this assumption of economy-wide shutdown, which is national, rather than shutdown to particular regions. And it would be for 3 months. So instead of doing it for the whole year, we are going to basically what we are going to do is very simple. We would divide the whole the whole shock by 4, and we will have it for 3 months. In the second scenario, what I'm going to show is the extraction. I'm going to do again hypothetical extraction method, in this case of the accommodation and food services and the arts, entertainment, and recreational sector. Remember that in the hypothetical extraction method, we are not putting just the final demand at 0. So we are not saying that just the private consumption and public consumption and exports and investment is going to be 0, but also the other sectors cannot buy from these sectors that I am putting here. They cannot buy, and these sectors cannot sell to other sectors. So everything is going to be 0. Just to give you a summary of the results we are getting for both scenarios. In the first scenario, these are annual figures. So if you want to compute more or less what it would be at the quarterly level, you have to multiply it. Let's be quick. You have to multiply it by 4. For example, so if I give you the gross value added for the whole UK, it would change. It would be a decrease by minus 3.58%, which multiplied by 4 would be quite close to what the other estimations were saying. So something between 12%, 14%, something like that for the quarter. So this is annual figures again. In terms of jobs, it would be affecting, or is exposing basically, the amount of people that is exposed is 1,200,000 people, jobs basically, and it means close to 4% of the annual jobs for the UK. If we take a look to the hospitality and recreational activities, we can see that, and this is the total, so that's why again it's annual. It means close to 6.6% of the gross value added. And in terms of jobs, in these two sectors, there are 3.3 million people not working directly, but also indirectly, which means a lot of people, which means close to 11% of the whole number of jobs in the UK. What I'm showing you here is basically the regional exposure to scenario 1 in gross value added, in annual figures again. And you can see here in the left how this scenario 1 of lockdown, the OECD scenario, would affect more West Midlands, Warwickshire, Derbyshire, and then Lancashire and Cumbria. Most of these regions are manufacturing regions. They are related to transport equipment. And so we are assuming that the shutdown is going to decrease transport equipment by 100%. Those regions are the ones that are going to be more affected. The effect is going to go from this minus 2.7 of Tees Valley and Durham, where Newcastle is, to the normal ones, to 4%, something like that, of East Wales. That is where most of the regions are located. Then, of course, you have these other ones that are going to be more affected. In the case of the hospitality and recreational activities, in terms of GVA, extracting these two sectors would affect way more Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly. And this is, well, you probably know it already, is the most touristic part in the UK, except for London probably. But in terms of the percentage of GVA, the contribution of the GVA to the region, Cornwall for sure would be the most affected by tourism. Then you have also, again, what I was saying, inner London West, you have Cumbria that have many national parks, North Yorkshire, inner London East, and Highlands and Islands. So there are regions that are that depend more on tourism, and in the case of inner London, that depends also on recreational activities, sports, museums, and so on. So those are the ones that are more affected. But again, the main part of the regions are going to see a decline, or the contribution of these sectors for most of the regions is between 4.3% and 6%, more or less. if we compare it again with the gross disposable income to see how the poorer and the richer regions are doing in these economic exposure terms, in terms of GBA again, you can see here that, well, the poorer regions are being a little bit more exposed, not much. You cannot talk much about it. It is true that the richer region, which is inner London West here, is not being much exposed to the first scenario, and the opposite is happening when we calculate the exposure to hospitality and recreational lockdowns, let's say, or shutdowns, versus the gross disposable income. Here, the slope is a little bit more clear, and the ones that are richer are suffering a little bit more this economic exposure from these two sectors. If we try to see the exposure of the occupations of scenario 1 and hospitality and recreational sectors, we can go directly for the skill level exposure, and it's interesting to see that the ones that are more exposed to these lockdown scenarios are always the low skill people. So both in the first scenario and the hotel and recreational activities are the ones more affected. So to conclude now, and I hope I was not I didn't take too much time for this. We could see along these three chapters disparity of results for the regions. We have seen richer regions that are more diversified, if we remember what was happening with the foundational economy, but also that they are selling their products, normally services, to other UK regions, and they are basically affected by these hospitality and recreational shutdowns. The poorer regions, in contrast, they depend more on the foundational economy, plus normally they are specializing in one or two manufacturing sectors, so they export those sectors to outside the UK, and they are mainly affected by supply chain disruptions. So in terms of interregional inequality, we cannot say much. We see a slight increase in the interregional inequalities when we have a reduction in exports in general, or when we have the first scenario, but we cannot say that the effects were very clear. In the case of the shocks related to the hospitality and recreational activities, the exposure was more affecting the richer regions, so it could reduce a little bit also the interregional inequality. What is more interesting of the things that we were showing here in these three stages, or these three chapters, is the importance of the invisible workers, and we should stress this a little bit more. Almost half of the workers are working directly or indirectly for the foundational economy, and though this foundational economy, as we were seeing by the definition, are sectors that cannot be closed because they are the core part of the economy, and at the end of the day, these sectors that cannot be closed show us the complexity that one economy has. So almost more than or close to 50% of the economy cannot be closed. So we have to think about it before talking about essential production and non-essential production, because some of the indirect sectors could be supplying to the essential production. Finally, which is also interesting, is to see that low-skill occupations are more exposed to lockdown scenarios, and this is a sign, or this can be translated that into interpersonal inequality is going to be increased, is going to grow due to the coronavirus 19 crisis. We cannot say much about interregional inequalities, but we can say that interpersonal inequality can grow, which means that the inequality within each region is quite high too. For discussing now, among all the attendees, of course, you can choose other topics for discussion, but I choose these ones. What I am doing here is basically an accounting exercise. I'm not predicting what would happen in case of a shutdown or not, because try to predict what the agents are going to do is quite complicated. So basically what we are doing here is economic contribution or exposure. We are not doing impact in strict sense. But we could do some other refinements, let's say. So in further work, I would say that I would love to do this with seasonal input-output tables. Abelino, in his nice paper in 2017, he showed how to do it. And it would be also very nice to include to that model length of the contracts of each of the workers. That would be excellent. Then it has to be also taking into account the paper by Dietzenbacher in 2019, where he was talking about hypothetical extraction methods in multi-regional input-output models. In there, some of the things that he was mentioning is that when you're extracting some of the trade partners, it could be a substitution between that and another one that you can find. But the question that we can make here is if it is possible to find these kind of substitutions when supply chains are being disrupted in the short term, and some sectors are being closed, some countries are having border closures and this kind of scenario. So it's different, for example, from the Brexit scenario, where you have some time for trying to change the trade partners. Then I'm also some question that I have in my head, and that I just throw it here. I put it on the table. That if it makes sense to have partial extractions instead of having the whole extraction method. And what I mean by that is that if you think about sectors that are being shutting down, like for example accommodation, or in this case restaurants or bars, yeah, they cannot provide any kind of product, any kind of service. They cannot sell anything to private consumption or public consumption or exports or whatever. But it is true that they still pay the electricity bills, they are still paying the rent, etc. So how we can account for that in input-output models is still complicated and still a little bit fuzzy, let's say. One way that was in my head is try to use an ARCOT model, a rectangular choice of technology model that Dutching and Levine in 2011 described. Basically, and for this, it would be very interesting to have these 2020 input-output tables that someone was mentioning in the last webinar, because it would give us the opportunity to have different technologies, basically technologies where there is no kind of disruption or lockdown, and then technology of this sector under lockdown, and then we can choose between the two different technologies for producing under a lockdown, let's say, or depending on the situation that we have in the economy. So that is something that I would love to have if we have this kind of input-output tables. Then, of course, to see what would happen with the youth employment, what is happening with women, are they more affected than men? Probably yes. And more importantly, even the labor conditions of both these groups of workers, but also of the low-skill workers in general. That would be very interesting to see what is happening there. Then, of course, as a as a fan of blockbusters, some of them they normally have another trilogy, and probably we can have a third trilogy of chapters. Some work that can be done, for example, is tourism. So what was happening during this summer, imagine that we continue after these first 6 months, we continue during the summer, and we could see what would be the effect of these people in the UK that didn't go to countries like Spain, for example, and they decided to stay and do some tourism domestically and went to places like Cornwall. Then for chapter 5, it would be interesting to see what was happening with international students. Were they coming, were they not? What happened also with the national students? Were they staying in the regions, or they decided to move? Because in the UK, basically the mobility for choosing universities is quite high. So that would be interesting also to see. And especially also in the long term, what will be the effects of that. And then finally, for chapter 6, what we are having now is that we are having different regional lockdowns depending on the contagion levels, and that would create a completely different picture of the interregional inequality effects and how each region is being affected, of course. Last thought that I threw here is some of the movement that is going around here also in the UK is this manifesto. So they had a manifesto for the foundational economy in 2013. Now they have a manifesto for the care system. Basically, what they are claiming here is that we may need to rethink and rebalance how the economy works, and focus more into a care, health, or foundational system where people is at the center of the economy. And of course, we tend to check better or to satisfy better their well-being and their needs, and not to try to invest in other sectors that are mainly less focused on people, let's say. That would be all from my side. I hope it was not too boring, not too long, and any comments that you could have will be very, very welcome. Let me.
Yeah, thank you, Andres. I can tell you that it was not too boring or too long. Interesting. Can you please stop sharing your screen?
I'm trying. Okay, now I think.
Okay.
Okay, now I think I
Oh
did
yeah,
it.
perfect, perfect. Okay, very nice talk. Perfect timing. So we have now time for questions. If you want to make a question, please raise your hand and we will unmute you. There is a question coming from the US. Jeff, you are somewhere. Can you unmute yourself? I think so. Yeah.
Thank you, Esteban. And thank you, Andre. And let me take this opportunity to congratulate you on achieving your fantasy of moving from Galicia to Asturias, starting, I think, in December. We look forward to working with you. I have a number of comments. First, this is really excellent stuff. And I really hope that you will take advantage of what you've done and package it into a series of articles and try to get this out, because it really is important for us to address the whole issue of the emerging interests in regional modeling of dealing with unexpected events. You know, too much of our modeling has assumed an equilibrium situation, and now we're saying, yeah, but we have floods, we have hurricanes, we have Donald Trump, and now we have COVID. And I think dealing with those sorts of things becomes important. Let me just make a few comments about some things that you might want to consider. I think that there's been quite some work in the US on the effect of the subsidies that were provided to people who had lost their jobs through furloughs and so on and so forth. And a couple of things that were very surprising from the analysis that is being conducted with very high frequency data that have come out. First is dramatic changes in how that money was spent across goods and services, so that the consumption profiles that you use in your model probably need to be adjusted to reflect that. Secondly, even more surprising, even for low-income people, increase in savings. And a lot of times, the money that they received from the federal government was used to pay down debt, not to go out and buy consumer goods and services. And the third thing was, how do people adjust when they may not lose their job, but they move from full-time to part-time? And these sorts of intermediate issues, you might want to think perhaps adopting some of the strategy in the sort of Beatty-Madden model, where you have an activity analysis where people moving from employment to but you might have them full-time to part-time to unemployment. Second one that was really surprising was the impact of decreases of spending by middle and high-income people on employment creation of low-income people. And that was something that we've looked at in terms of the impacts on income inequality, but in terms of employment generation, that was important. So middle and upper income people could not go to restaurants. That meant the restaurant jobs were lost, and then you have the associated ripple effect. The other two other quick things. One is the substitution effects that you might want to consider. What happens as people move from in-person to online shopping? What are the employment generation? Because you're going to increase in demand for certain types of services and decrease in others. And the final thought I have is, I'm really concerned about this notion of essential employments, foundational. I'm reminded of Richard Florida's notion about the creative class. The creative class is only attracted to communities that have a lot of non-creative people there, cleaning the streets, providing restaurants and other services. So, I just look at this in the point of a lot of analysis here has shown that a lot of people cannot go back to work because they can't put their children in daycare. All right. But nobody ever thought about daycare as an essential service. But in other words, when you really look at it, if the world is Leontief, the loss of any activity is going to have a disruptive effect. And so I think we need to be perhaps a little bit more holistic in thinking about this and not try to do it's sort of like the key sector analysis and so forth and so forth. And I think we miss out on the fundamental circularity of that economy and how critical it is. But again, wonderful presentation. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jeff. Well, of course I agree with all of the things that you were saying, all the comments that you were having. I would really much like to have next wave of the consumption surveys that normally do, to see what it was happening during these lockdowns and to see what it was happening in the last year. I think some of the comments that you were saying about going from full-time to part-time and also seeing the substitution effects in consumption, that would be really great to do. What you were saying, with a Beatty model, it can be done, and then having some new profiles of consumption from these surveys. It can be calculated this, but by now I didn't have a chance of, and I think we are not going to see this kind of figures for a while, sadly. But yeah, regarding to the foundational economy, is exactly what I was thinking when I was seeing these manifestos and these kind of things. That's why I put it in this presentation, because it's quite related to what Jorge and Luis were doing for the invisible workers. We normally tend to think about sectors in a direct way, but it is not like that. We have many people that is working that we take it for granted, as you were saying, for example, for the daycare. That was the clear example of what was everyone seeing in this lockdown time. For everyone to be able to go to work, we need this primary education, and we need these nurseries, and we need these schools to be open. Otherwise, it is basically impossible to go to work. Exactly the same thing as I was saying that Jorge and Luis were doing for these invisible workers in that article. So it's not just about the health services, it's also about the other indirect services that are supplying them. But yes, thank you very much, Jeff. Great to see you, or to hear you at least.
Okay, thank you, Andre. More questions, please. If not, I have a couple of, I don't know if questions, but comments myself. Well, very interesting stuff, what you were presenting here. But I have some thoughts, some curiosities, if you want to call it that way, about possible extensions of what you did, in the sense that, for example, all the analysis that I've seen so far involving some type of input-output modeling and the impact of coronavirus, they're basically on the, let's say, only on the inter-industry relationships. But I didn't see anything so far regarding the induced effects by consumption, which I get. My intuition is that it's pretty high, at least in an economy as the Spanish one. I think one of the most important effects were not all the effects derived from all these inter-industry interactions, but also because of the contraction of consumption, how this is impacting on the economy. Of course, this can be done by using some kind of SHAIO analysis or some social accounting matrix. But I don't know if you know some analysis related to that. And another thing, I think it's similar to what Jeff was mentioning before about this distributional effect. Something that you were stressing during your presentation is the effect of teleworking, because you were mentioning that, for example, the impact of the virus was being harder for the lowest workers, and I think there is a lot of correlation there with the possibilities of doing some telework. So in general, high skilled workers, they have more flexibility for keeping doing their jobs, and actually many of the activities that can be done from home, they kept working as semi-normal. But in many low-skill occupations, I mean, if you If you work as a waiter, you have to be there. If you work in the construction sector, you have to be there, generally speaking. So I'm curious about this, and I think it's another source of inequality. Yeah, basically that's it. Thank you. Yeah, Andre.
Thank you, Steve. Very interesting comments. No, I thought about them also myself. I mean, about the induced effects. Yeah, it is related also what Jeff was saying about to calculate the effect of the subsidies to the people that was furloughed or that was redundant. Yeah, exactly. That would be the way to go. Through a social accounting matrix, you can basically try to do these things. But it is also very interesting because most of the people, and that's what Jeff was saying too, instead of consuming in other things, they were basically saving the money that they were the ones that were continue earning money. They were mainly saving it. So we should expect an increase in consumption in the future at some point. Let's see. But yeah, through social accounting matrices or kind of Miyazawa, what Jeff was saying, Beatty models could also be interesting for trying to see these extra and induced effects and extra effects of government paying subsidies and these kind of things. And then regarding the second comment, it is exactly like that. I mean, that last table that I was showing how the different skill levels, different occupations were affected by the different scenarios of the lockdown. It can be, let's say, reduced if you can basically do some teleworking, which is what you were saying. But it is exactly what you were saying. For skilled people, for more the higher skilled people, teleworking is going to be more easy, let's say, to do, or more approachable. For low skill, they normally be these kind of occupations are normally related to person approaches, activities, and this kind of things. So more in close contact. It is also interesting to see the differences that are in teleworking and sectors and occupations by regions, because the richer regions are also the ones that have better advantage in being able to do some telework in comparison with the poorer regions. So all these numbers that I was putting here on exposure can be in a way relative to this possibility of doing some teleworking, and it would increase, let's say, interregional inequalities in those cases that were also at hand, and also interpersonal inequalities that we were seeing. But yeah, totally agree. Thanks, Esteban.
Can I jump in?
Yes, sure.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So first of all, greetings to all friends here in Spain, in Europe, and the US, everywhere. Andre, very good. Thanks it was a very excellent presentation. Well, I have a few, let's say, comments probably. So I agree fully with the comments raised by Jeff, especially on these foundational sectors, etc. But apart from that, simply methodological issues. It's also related to what Esteban was asking. So I think the use of complete hypothetical extraction method is a bit extreme. Mm-hmm. And you already pointed out this at the final part of your presentation. I think the best way is, if you use hypothetical extraction, it's better to use partial extraction method. And if you are not aware, probably you are aware, there's a very nice study by Haddad and his colleagues, where he uses basically partial extraction method, mm-hmm. and the way he sort of finds out those factors, by what extent this particular sector has been shrinked and downsized, is through using the restricted employment in total mm-hmm. employment. So this is one approach. If you are not aware, probably you are aware of this paper, but I think this is the way. It's better to use the partial extraction. Otherwise, mm-hmm. The assumptions are too rigid. Yeah. And another thing, you see, this COVID crisis is a bit special in the sense that it's both supply side and it's mm-hmm. also demand side. And if we think that these two sectors are different, then there is also a potential of using the mixed IO model. Now, you somehow exogenize the output of those sectors which are supply side restricted, and then you have final demand, which are final demand restricted. And of course, I fully agree with Esteban that we should use the kind of, at least Miyazawa approach, also to understand this induced effect. Yes, that's basically what I want. But thank you so much. And yes, I'm very happy to see you all.
Thanks, Sumit. Great to see you too. Thank you very much for the comments. I mean, they are very, very good. I mean, both of them. I mean, I knew about the partial extraction method. I knew about the Haddad, but I have to be honest. When I was doing these blogs, my intention was to do something quick and simple. And then when they invited me to do this talk, but basically what I did was expanded it to the UK regions and to see if I can get something better from comparing them. If I wanted to do something a little bit more complete, yes, I would go for the partial, and I will explain it like I was saying at the very end, and that you were saying there that the complete hypothetical extraction method is the assumptions are too strong. Then I like the idea of the mixed style model with supply restrictions and demand restrictions. That could be a very nice way to approach it. I really like it. I didn't thought about it, but it could be a very nice idea. Yeah. Thanks very much, Umen.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We have time for one last question, I think, if anyone wants to make it. Jorge, please. Jorge, sorry, you are, we need to unmute you. No.
It's not a question, it's only, I want to say thank you to André for quoting us. But I have to say that we only wrote a small piece of disclosure paper. This is a real investigation. This is a real research. Thank you for your presentation. It has been inspirational, as all the comments are written in the chat now. I agree with all of the people that thinks that we have to rethink many things during these times. It's very interesting to see your reflection and your figures about the labor conditions, and also about because we are facing, at least in Spain, we are facing this moral debate on this great controversy to deal with the temporary workers at the agricultural sectors, combined with the pandemic and stuff like that. So I think it's very, very inspirational, and we will try to follow your guidelines to try to do something similar to Spain, because I think is very useful and interesting. And we have this great tool of the input-output can provide some answers that are really interesting to be answered now. So thank you for the presentation. It has been amazing to hear you.
Thanks, Jorge. Thanks. No. Don't be that humble. Your article was very nice. I enjoyed very much reading it. It was very, very inspirational. And then yes, exactly. And you have been doing, in particular, your group in the Castilla-La Mancha. You have been doing work on the conditions of different workers around the world. You could also add this dimension of the coronavirus crisis to this. To this issue of the labor conditions. Yeah, great. Thank you very much, Jorge.
Okay, so great. I think we can leave it here. If there is no other question coming or comment, your last chance. Okay, so if not, well, telling you, I think we can leave it here. Just let me close this session thanking again, André, for your very nice presentation, for being so kind of accepting our invitation to present here. Thanking everybody in attending this online webinar. We will be in touch. Okay. In the meantime, please take care of yourself and stay safe and healthy, please. Okay, so see you guys.
See you. Thanks, Esteban.
Bye bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Hey.